was the upgrading of its quality products. It was distribution of those products around the world. So the message, I think, at this point, I could go on, but it's pretty clear. It was best expressed not by me, but by the Greek philosopher Socrates, who said, "The way to achieve a better reputation is to try to be what you desire to appear." Or in other words, it is not possible to construct a reputation. A reputation can only be earned. Most countries have the reputation they have because they don't deserve a better one. And I think one of the most valuable objectives that any country can have when looking into these issues is to be perfectly, absolutely, totally objective. And to say, this reputation that we have today, this image, that we don't like, that we're dissatisfied with. By the way, every country is dissatisfied with its image. I have never yet come across a country that is satisfied with its image. Why have we got this image today? Is it because everybody out there is ignorant and stupid? No. It's because we don't deserve a better one. And that's either because we haven't done the right things, or it's because we've done the right things but we've not made them attractive or interesting enough. But 99 times out of 100, it's because the country simply doesn't matter. And so I would urge people always to think in terms of relevance before they think of anything else. Rather than asking the question, what can we say to make Korea famous, we should be asking the question, what can we do to make Korea relevant? It's a mystery, isn't it, that Korea ranks so high in substance and yet ranks so low in perception. But in reality, there's no mystery to it at all. The simple reason why Korea ranks so low in perceptual terms is because it lacks relevance to most people in most other countries. Why would somebody in the United States or Argentina, or anywhere else for that matter, think about Korea from one day to the next? You may be a successful country, but what have you got for them? What have you done for them? Why should they think about you? My research suggests that most people in most countries only ever really think of, at most, about 10 countries. They think about their own country, not a lot, just a little bit. And then they think of about 9 other countries which they consider to be globally prominent, the mainstream players, the countries that are always in the news because they're important, economically or politically or for some other reason. And that's about it. Those countries for them exist, they're in the mainstream. Now, the last time I checked, there were about 190 other countries in the world. That basically means that 180 countries, for the vast majority of people on this planet, effectively do not exist. Now, Korea, for most other countries, is not in the top 10. It's not in the mainstream. It has no reason to be. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not particularly relevant to most people's lives. For Korea to want to go from the 180 countries that don't exist into the mainstream of the 10 that do exist is a very, very significant ambition. Which one of those 10 are you going to knock out in order to be in the top 10? America? Sweden? France? Germany? Japan? These are the terms in which one has to think. Now, number 15, is a very significant ambition as well. I have to say that the ambition to get Korea from number 30 in my index to number 15 is absolutely impossible. This cannot happen. No country has ever moved by more than one position in my ranking, for the simple reason that people are very, very attached to their prejudices about other countries. Almost nothing on earth can make them change their mind about another country. We all rely on these views, these simple brands of other countries, to navigate in a complex global environment, and almost nothing will make us change our minds about them. So there is simply no possibility, I'm afraid, at least on my index, of Korea moving from number 30 to number 15, at least not in our lifetimes. But its score can change by much smaller amounts. What I have to say in conclusion is that I'm tremendously impressed by the sophistication of what we've just heard from Dr. Yu. This field really has come on. When I first started talking about nation brand, getting on for 20 years ago, my task then was to try to persuade governments that reputation was important. Today, I come to a country like Korea and I find a project that's already been developed that says right from the very beginning, this is nothing to do with marketing, this is nothing to do with advertising. This is about earning our place in the community of nations, gaining importance for ourselves, talking about reality and substance rather than spin and propaganda. I can't tell you how pleased and proud that makes me feel, because this field, which I like to think that in some way I contributed to starting, is beginning to come of age. And governments are beginning to understand not just that this is very, very important indeed, but also that it cannot be achieved by mere propaganda. You cannot create a new reputation for yourself. You have to build it through substance, through innovation, through policies, and through investment. And I'm delighted to see that the intention of the Korean government is to do precisely that. You will not gain 15 places in my index, I'm sorry to say, but you are on track for doing this very difficult thing much better than many other countries have done up until now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anholt, for your inspiring suggestions on how to raise our nation branding, and thank you also for your candid advice. Well, I think you kept strictly 10 minutes rule, so I appreciate that. Well, let's move on to the next speaker. We will have Dr. Lee Dong-hun, Director of Brand Strategy Group, Samsung Electronics. His title is Nation Brand Dual Octagon Model. Dr. Lee, please.
I'm Lee Dong-hun, a research fellow at Samsung Economic Research Institute. I have a great pleasure to present to you. Especially, it's my honor and privilege to have an originator of a Nation Brand Index, Mr. Arnold, here with us this afternoon. A nation brand refers to a country's degree of reliability and image. Simon Arnold, the world top authority in nation branding, and Philip Kotler, international marketing guru, have defined nation brand generally as a verb, though it's a very comprehensive concept. Nation branding has increasingly become an important concept for national strategy. Indeed, enhancement of a nation brand leads to higher preferences and evaluation levels for a nation. An enhanced nation brand creates a positive feedback loop of increased attractiveness in investment, tourism, and residence in terms on inbound perspective. In an outbound perspective, nation branding promotes a country's expert, people, and culture. Therefore, comprehensive guidelines need to devise to identify the current status of a nation brand, while a strategy should be established and advanced in nation brand. The first principle in this regard is that index system should be comprehensive. A nation brand is composed of two key elements: competitiveness, which refers to a strong nation and hard power, and image, which refers to attractiveness and soft power. Yet, existing nation brand indexes tend to consider only portion of the two. The second principle is that index should not only to use the measurement tool, but also be used in conjunction with the concrete execution strategy that can be raised a nation brand. We have thus designed a model that identifies the gap between the substance and perceived image. Through the benchmarking developed country and rivals, we have found direction for the improvement. First, we have closely analyzed the existing indexes in order to develop our model. First, the Arnold GfK index, which is currently the most recognized nation brand model, is composed of 6 components: export, tourism, people, governance, culture and heritage, immigration, investment. The Arnold GfK model is the first attempt at the ranking national brands. A comprehensive set of parts make up a nation brand under the model. It's highly regarded as a major general issue on a comprehensive scale. Yet, we have applied what we believe to be some improvements to the model. First, the model exhibits a problem in terms of a logical support for 6 elements. Also, the model elements are not mutually exclusive. Furthermore, the annual GFK survey is based solely on people's perception, and its application to national strategy is somewhat insufficient. CBI was developed by Future Brand in conjunction with the Weber Sandvik Global Travel Practice. It includes various survey education, but has a limitation on logical backup, as an index focused on tourism and business sector. It also limits itself from being a measure of nation branding on a comprehensive scale. In addition to, the model is a mixture of independent and dependent variable, and the survey depends on travelers and businessmen. Thus, it's difficult to consider it's an adequate measure. The Institute for the Industrial Policy Study Country Brand Power Index convert the value of a country brand on the monetary terms. The index is similar to the Nation Brand Index. In this model, there is a high possibility the psychological proximity could be biased due to geographical proximity. While the concept of nation brand strategy is somewhat ambiguous, we also judged the model does not sufficiently address questions concerning the multiply effect. The IMD and WEF indexes, which are representative national comparative indexes, rely on statistical data and are complemented by survey. Limitation of these 2 indexes they focus on the economy, government, infrastructure, and exclude so-called soft areas. They therefore exhibit limitation to be a nation brand index. The following conclusions were made based on the indexes mentioned above. First, in terms of a model, the comprehensive approach, like that of the Anhalt Index, should be introduced, and the system of the index should be strengthened. The second, both substance and image should be examined, increase the usability of the index. Third, both the validity and the reliability of the survey method should be improved. Next, let me explain briefly index that we have developed. David Acker, regarded as a world authority on brand management, distinguished the components of a corporate brand identity as a product, organization, symbol, and person. If we convert this into the national perspective, a nation brand can be said to be composed of wealth, governments, culture, and people. A product at the corporate level can be converted wealth, which is output at the national level, such as economic production, knowledge, and technology. Organization, in turn, is converted into the characteristic of government organization, policy, and social infrastructure. While a symbol could be considered cultural content, derived from the historical sites and natural environments. Lastly, person can be interpreted as a national characteristic and images that are formed by ordinary citizen and celebrity. We have also taken into the consideration the components of the Niccolo Machiavelli universally accepted concept of a nation, which is composed of sovereignty, territory, and people. We have extended the basic concept of sovereignty, which refers to claim of territory and diplomatic independence into a modern perspective that includes policy, institution, economic independence, technological independence, unique cultural and historical tradition. We have interpreted territorial as to include all geographical space, including territorial land, water, and air, with a nation's sovereignty, as well as natural landscape and infrastructure, including transportation, telecommunication, utility, education, and medical facilities. The concept of people was extended to refer to members of ruled by national law and also include morality, cleanliness, openness, and celebrity in all of life, such as a politician, economist, artist, pop star. Applying these two perspectives, as we can see in this table. Let me explain the variable measure, these 8 components. The characteristic of our model measure the actual statistic as a perceived image of the 8 components. The image variable was measured based on the 36 survey questionnaires. The substance variable was measured based on 125 pieces of hard data, including GDP per capita, number of patents registered, and policy effectiveness of World Bank. In short, we propose a nation brand index model, or we so-called NB, National Brand Do model, NB-Do model. It's composed of 8 components and measure both of substance and image. Thus, we have a title it the dual octagon model. In order to measure the nation brand, in this model incorporates pre-existing indexes and further enhance them in more comprehensive level, making it more suitable when applied the national strategy. If we compare the annual index with our model, as seen in this figure, it does not include particular components such as celebrity, and that we have a use as it solely depends on survey. When looking at the future brand, the CBI focusing placed on tourism sector, while there is also reliance on survey. By contrast, IMD and WEF national comparative indexes clearly focus on competitiveness, hence their title, and overlook soft area like national attractiveness. We have completed verification of NB-Do model through the preliminary examination and plan to conduct the actual survey with this model in the near future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, and I think it would be very tough for you, to introduce a new model, within 10 minutes. But nevertheless, I think it's a very provoking invention of new models. So I'm just wondering, and I'm curious how Mr. Arnold would react to your new invention. Well, let's move on to the last, third main speaker, Mr. Dr. Bernard Spitz. He will present his view, on nation branding in a global context, Korea seen from a European country, French view.
안녕하세요. 오늘 참석해 주셔서 감사합니다. That's all for my Korean, sorry, but just another thing, if I have to respect the 10 minutes, pari pari. So, let's start this presentation. I have been working with Korean companies in the last 7 years, I like very much your country, and I think it has a lot to say to the world, but how to do it requires indeed some strategy of development and some re-engineering of your national brand. In fact, I would like to start from one point. Each nation has a different perception of the rest of the world according to their own history, culture, tradition, interests. The vision of Korea by the New Yorker is not the one by the Parisian or the inhabitant of London. If you take, as an example, the world seen from New York, Asia seen from New York, and you have the colors are dependent on the number of articles edited in the New York Times, so it gives a good idea of the interest in the country. You see, what do you see? Very strong interest for China for obvious reasons, a lot of interest for Japan, and yes, indeed, Korea as an ally, and also a good and a strong manufacturer. Now, let's see the world scene from London, and Asia scene from London. And here it's different, because number one is India, for obvious reasons, and then you have China, and then Japan. And Korea has not the same priority. And now if you look at the world scene from Paris, and Asia seen from Paris. So you have China in number one, you have Japan as a technological innovator, and because that's the way of history, we have these countries with which France had a lot of history. So Korea, again, is not there. It's not, it's just the reality. So what makes for a strong country image today? We have identified four major elements. The first one, of course, famous personalities. Second one, major landmarks. Third one, internationally recognized cultural influence. And last but not least, strong brands and products. Where is Korea? And this is where Korea is lacking. If we take, for instance, brands, big companies, we have not the same phenomenon as for Japan that has been mentioned earlier. When Japan was very proud to produce as a banner the Made in Japan. In fact, today Korean manufacturers, they don't want to support so much the Korean flag. They are not Korean, they are global, and it is important in the modern world today. But of course, the country's image does not benefit at the same level than for Japan 20 years ago. And some people in many countries do not know that Samsung is Korean. I think many of them think it's Japanese. There is the underestimation of the Korean culture. It has a highly respected classical musicians, and you have also the Korean wave, but it could be very famous in Japan. When you look in other continents, and especially in Europe, nobody has heard about the Korean wave, although some Korean directors are become more popular. In terms of landmarks, there is, of course, nothing as famous as the Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal, or Big Ben. And the last element, in the personalities, we have had today the US Secretary General Ban Ki-moon present here. I think that perhaps the most famous Korean in Europe is Park Ji-sung from Manchester United. But again, they are not household names. That's why we have tried to rationalize that through an objective measure, which is not exactly the same concept as the index. It's a little bit complementary. And we have classified the image, for instance, in France, of the French perception of other culture. If you took the example of Italy, it has a very strong reputation in culture and in landmarks, a little bit less regarding products and personalities. If you compare that to the United States, you see it's a little bit different. And of course, the larger the surface is, the stronger the image of the country is. Regarding Korea, well, Korea doesn't do so well. Why isn't Korea's image stronger? In fact, you have several reasons. First of all, Korea's image is cannibalized by North Korea. North Korea's image is very negative, but very strong. And South Korea's image is positive, but weak. Once you have brandished the nuclear threat, everything else pales. Korea is seen as one of a group of mid-sized Asian countries. And the problem is it's hard to tell apart. You have to build more your identity. And I think it's time to change, because within the next 10 years, we will see the development of your big neighbors, India, China, Japan, and it will be more difficult to catch the attention of the other people. And as it was said earlier, people have not in mind a lot of countries, so it is a window of opportunity today to solve this. How this can be changed? I think rebranding Korea cannot be attempted piecemeal. First of all, the approach must be respectful of foreign cultures and open-minded. It means that the effort must be abroad, but also in Korea. Then the approach must be also global and based about country-specific programs in partnerships with foreigners. There must be a very organized work and in connection under the leadership of the Presidential Council of Nation Branding, of course, but in each major country there should be a coordination of all embassies, chambers of commerce, expatriate Korean business representatives, as well as local experts, that they should get together on a regular basis and establish long-term goals and agree on intermediate stages and get to work. And the construction of a network of people who are going to support Korea's image is also something very important to establish in every target country. So if you want to be more concrete and pragmatic, what are the tools, the key tools? First of all, the idea of a real network. Making a network is difficult, because it's not like having some VIPs in a dinner. You have really to get people who will understand Korea, will come to Korea, will be able to Korea to their friends in general. Let's take, for example, journalists, very influential journalists. They will take Korea's products or events as examples in their articles. And if they are not in that mood, of course, you lose a lot of potential. We have a lot of examples. If you look of the very professional organization of Israel, for instance, in the United States, you see a very good example of efficiency, long-term strategy, and dedication. Another very good example, I think, is an organization like the US-German Marshall Fund. Eventually, I was a fellow a long time ago of the US-German Marshall Fund, and this is a program with a focus on young leaders, which is very important, and on the long term, build a real, very strong, very potential network. Of course, this includes another strategy in terms of tourism. And I cannot develop, of course, in 10 minutes, all these elements, but I think it's a chain of things. Every single element is important, and I have seen in the presentation of the president of the Presidential Council earlier a lot of examples that have already been taken in consideration. But you know, I would say just one example. There is one French person that should have attended this forum this year in Jeju, and he didn't come because it was complicated with his holidays and so on. But he said the very reason is, I am a good friend of Korea. I am always talking about Korea since 10, 15 years, and I have never got anything from Korea, not even a medal, not even a thanks, nothing. And I think it's very interesting, because if you are not nice with the people who are nice with you, you cannot expect that much. I mean, it is a long-term strategy, and it is something that has to be addressed. Of course, you are already acting, and the construction of the council, the Presidential Council, is a very important step, as much as all the steps that you have already engaged. And just to take the example of France, I think that we have a typical example of two countries of more or less the same size, with a lot of common points and that are able to communicate. This is why I think that, for instance, the presence or the weakness of the presence of in France of Korea is a good example of something that could be avoided and that could be worked in the future. How to turn a weakness into a strength? In fact, I think that we have a good example with all these brands which are famous. And if I think you can be optimistic or pessimistic. If you want to be pessimistic, this is what you can say. If Korean companies handled their image the way Korea has done in the past, they would be bankrupt. But if you are optimist, and I am optimist, you can say just the opposite. If Korea can learn from its companies their method and professionalism in handling their image, we have room for this optimism. So, in conclusion, I just said this. Korea is a national player, but that has to be always more open to the rest of the world, abroad and in Korea. Of course, it has to be a provider of international solutions to global problems, as we discussed in the last 2 days. It has to have a coordinated, through the Presidential Council, but also flexible implementation of local strategies. And it has, on the long term, to have a global, integrated, sustained, pragmatic, professional approach with a combination of Korean and foreign experts. And that's it. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
Thank you again, Dr. Spitz, for your very valuable recommendations and counsel on how to raise the Korea's branding. Well, we heard, 3 main presentations. Now it's time for our 3 panelists to make their respective comments. We have 3 panelists. First will be Dr. Cho Dong-sung. Of course, he's a professor of business administration at Seoul National University, a Harvard-educated scholar. Next one is Dr. Kim Yu-kyung. He's professor of journalism and mass communication at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. He will be followed by Dr. Nicholas Kull. He's a professor of public diplomacy at the Annenberg School of University of Southern California. Dr. Kull will make another presentation in the concurrent session. Well, why don't we start from Dr. Cho, please? Save the time.
Yes, I will. Okay. Thank you very much. Indeed, today's session of this nation branding for 80 minutes should be extended, I believe, to like 8 hours at least, because each of the members, each member in this conference deserves to be given at least 1 hour or more of time to present each person's areas of expertise on